As iHeart and iTunes and the radio broadcast goes live, I make sure all these signals are on and things are popping up. And so, welcome. I want to say welcome to everyone to Free at Last. This is a podcast, live broadcast that I'm having with my friend, Dr. O'Shane, that we are going to be discussing mental health, right? And it's more than mental health, but we're going to give you education. And so, welcome everyone. Dr. O'Shane, welcome everyone to Free at Last, Free at Last.
Hello, Free at Last audience. Good evening. Happy Monday morning. Evening, excuse me. Wow.
Yeah.
Monday.
Well, I guess it depends on when you listen to it, how you listen to it. It could be any day you want it to be.
That's true.
Like we said when we introduced the show, Free at Last, what we're going to do, we're actually going to give you knowledge on what's happening in your life. You know what I mean? And so I want you to talk a little bit about fear, Dr. O'Shea, and what you have found out in your practice and in your studies.
The idea of fear is a pretty expansive
Right.
idea. And so when I think about fear, we could go so many different directions when we're talking about fear or even thinking about fear. To me, from a spiritual perspective, fear is that emotion, and even from we think about it from a biological perspective, that emotion that warns us that something is amiss, something is wrong, there might be some danger, something ahead may be too powerful to withstand in context to our particular sense of self, sense of power, or sense of agency. When I think about fear as a psychological emotion and psychospiritual emotion, I needed to say that emotion that keeps one in a limited sense of self, or from a limited sense of self. In other words, that is that emotion that makes people feel immobile, makes people feel limited, makes people feel constricted, makes people feel like there is an impending doom that is approaching, whether that is real or not. But they are living their lives from a state where they are expecting the worst, and they don't particularly feel empowered or strong enough to withstand whatever that mental fantasy is, or that real issue or experience may be.
You know, when you said there was such a key many factors that, you know, when you guys hear fear, and what Dr. O'Shane was talking about is that fear is a response. I mean, fear is it's an act, and it doesn't matter when we talk about things you're going through, like trauma. Now, how, like Dr. O'Shane, when you talk about trauma and fear, why do this little diagram before I talk about it? Talk about trauma and fear.
Well, depending on the particular trauma in which one has experienced, trauma directly impacts one's capacity to feel alive, one's capacity to feel strong, one's capacity around his or her self-agency. And so when we think about trauma and fear, the person who has experienced the trauma usually re-experiences the emotion of that trauma, particularly if they are triggered by an experience, a noise, by a person, by something in their surrounding that reminds them of that particular trauma or that time of that trauma. Those individuals then, as we talk about PTSD,
Right.
They begin to feel and relive that emotional experience, which, of course, causes a great deal of fear, a great deal of feeling limited, a great deal of feeling controlled, feeling like I don't have any agency or any power within this particular context, but also in terms of my own sense of general power or agency.
Now, here, folks. Now that you heard what Dr. O'Shane was talking about, and I apologize when I turn my back to you because I'm writing something. Because we also want to take what he said and bring it into what you understand the brain is doing, right? And since we're only going to talk about fear and trauma and how it relates and how it combines the two, we're going to talk about the two things that is key. There's multiple things that are key. Trust me, these aren't the only two, and these aren't the only factors, but there's contributory factors to it. But we're only going to talk about the hypothalamus, and we're going to talk about the hippocampus, right? So when we talk about fear, and we talk about the hypothalamus and the hippocampus now, it has what you call, it triggers the amygdala. Right? Most people know what the amygdala is because they've heard about it between flight or fight, but they forget about the freeze. Now, with these things, and here, this is important too. This right here is the brainstem. The reason why the brainstem is so important because it sends all our signals down into our body, into our spinal cord region. So the brainstem regulates our breathing. We'll get into that later. It is connected to the vagus nerve. If you guys don't know what that vagus nerve is, it's the longest nerve in the body, and it goes all the way down to what we call our second stomach, and that's where you find your moods, and your modes are your second brain. You know what I mean? So there's a big part of the vagus nerve in here. So when we talk about the amygdala, right, and it sits right here. And then right below it sits that pituitary gland. That pituitary gland is called the seat of the soul. Descartes talked about it all the time when we talked about history of brain and the brain emotions and things like that. Now, what also is being triggered with this, the hypothalamus and the hippocampus, is some adrenaline and some glands issues, right? So we have dopamine and we have adrenaline. Now, we also know when the hippocampus is triggered, it triggers because of the glands it touches right on the kidney and liver. So now we have just on triggering fear. Now, can these other things be triggered? Yes. But because of the chemical dropping of the body, and it changes. Now, all these changes because of what you call a neuron. And these neurons, in between these neurons, we have a signal, because it changes between these neurons. That's how it changes into a chemical. Welcome, everyone. This is where it changes to a chemical response into the body. Now, these neurons are with the cell, right? The oxygenated cell. So if you're lacking oxygen, just think if you're lacking oxygen, how much chemical that's being dumped in here and changes this oxygenated cell into a carbon cell. And we know if it changes to a carbon cell, more carbon that's introduced into our body, we become sick. That's where sickness actually, and then it actually affects the other cellular growth and white blood cells and how it comes, even if you have a cold or you have you're getting surgery, they want you to relax because these cells trigger a different chemical response from the neurons because of these axons is where this thing changes into a chemical. So as this chemical releases, it affects the kidneys. The kidneys are what cleans the blood, right? It helps us with oxygen, and liver helps cleans the blood. So, go ahead. So what do you think, Dr. O'Shane, as you're talking, so just what you said about fear and you feel like it's working against us, and it warns us if we are in danger. So because of this, this is the front part of the brain, and this is the occipital lobe and the rear part of the brain, all this gets darkened out, which is reason skills. Fear shuts all that out. Now, when we're talking about healing ourselves because of fear, every time we talk with a patient, am I right, Shane? We're asking you, what really are you afraid of? Because these chemical responses is stopping your rational reason development to heal yourself. What do you think, Dr. O'Shane?
I think that that's really powerful. I'd like you to talk a little bit more about how this works with oppressed populations who have real stimuli, real data that suggests, not only suggests, but that is real in the sense of danger to one's body, danger to one's life, where we have systems of oppression that are subtle and explicit that really are real and that can impact all of what you're talking about, and of course suspend our capacity to reason. So how do you think about this in the context? When I think about it clinically, I think about it from a narrative therapy perspective in helping patients to really retell or restory and to develop new ways of seeing their agency and seeing their power. But from a neurological perspective, how do you think about it?
Well, before I tell you how I think about it, one of those things about when it comes to trauma, it has happened. Because we don't really talk to people before trauma happens, right?
Yeah.
So this is always in a memory.
Yes.
Part of that memory recreation, and that's a key. The brain recreates memory. It is not factual. It recreates. And depending on how the emphasis is on what traumatized you and compress those signals, that neurotransmission, it is done by compression, right? So there's a pressure that happens when trauma happens. That's why you don't really want someone to speak if you're trying to protect them. This is the reason why they don't tell cops to give statements after a shooting. It's because of the neurotransmission and how it compresses. It changes the vision. But that's also the same reason why they try to get you to talk if they're trying to get a confession out of you. Because this blocks out any reasonable skills. When you're in fear or in trauma, it is very hard. It almost sounds like you're telling a lie, because if you're in the act of trauma, you start to go and like, it doesn't sound like you're very clear there, Mr. or Mrs. So this is all those mental traps that it can be played upon you when you don't know what is reacting. Now, if you have an attorney, they say, because attorneys have this information, we don't want our client to speak because they might say something emotionally that isn't factually true, right?
Yeah.
So going back to that, when we talk about the neurotransmitter in the hippocampus, memory is developed in the hippocampus as the same place the oldest part of the brain is, which is the amygdala, which is the freeze, flight, or fight. So that seems like there is a little bit of who's going to talk before who, right? What do you think, Dr. O'Shane?
Well, I was thinking about how one explains the changing of memories or memories not being factual. Does that account for all traumas, like rape?
Yes.
How would you explain that? When a person has been raped, what memory would be different?
So let me clarify that the memory may not be different, but they'll have to piece together the full memory. So that's why they'll keep asking you. There's different parts of your brain that's going to allow things to go through and allow things to be kept. But if I keep asking you, that I can able to piece together that puzzle. And that's why there's always another conversation or another talk through, because those pieces, the truth pieces will come out even when you talk with a counselor or your therapist. And that's why we keep going over it, because even you as a person that is wanting to heal yourself and explain all your miseries or whatever so you can be a better person, we'll go over this over and over and over again because it has to wash its way up. So it has to bring itself up from a signal. Now remember, these neurons they vibrate. So this is why we talk about vibration. So this is why we a lot talk about vibration on cells, is because these neurons, they vibrate. And as they vibrate, they send a different chemical response out from its axion, A-X-O-N, axion. These is right here between the dendrites, or between these is where the axion vibrates or the chemical gets releases. But if the neurons are vibrating at a high level, this chemical response is different if it's in a sad place or a good place. And that's what triggers the cell to be a positive cell or a negative cell in its reaction. And hence we can go into why it ends up allowing cancer to come into your life. But just if you think about the hypothalamus also, and then how it releases these adrenaline gland and how it attaches to on top of the kidneys and the liver, and then you wonder why it's producing such a high glucose in a lot of black people. This has more to do with, I really believe that, like I was saying this before, I think when you start triggering your liver and kidney to secrete higher glucose, are blacks really, would you say, have more diabetes in their culture? Yes. Is it because of their foods? Probably so. But I also think it's allowed to be happening quicker or more often because of the trauma they have not allowed to release in their lives.
Yes, and that is, when you're listening to you talk, that's the importance, or why I practice from an analytic perspective.
Right.
Because we talk over and over with the patient, a client, about their history, and they rediscover, as you say, parts of their history they forgot.
Right. Right.
Oh, that really didn't. Mommy didn't say that. It was Daddy who said that. oh, it wasn't at this party. It was at that party. And so those incidental things that we might think are incidental, as you were talking about, as the memory retrieves itself and corrects itself and the truth comes out, then people feel different. And they see themselves or their particular presenting issue or problem from a very different vantage point, which allows them to first, in many ways, feel more empowered, which allows them to confront their own misinformation, to forgive themselves for that misinformation, to forgive others for that misinformation, to reconcile relationships as a consequence of the new emerging way of seeing that truth or that experience. And so, yes, when you're talking, everything you're saying is making sense to me clinically around how and what I've seen over the years, and why talk therapy has done really well is really a great opportunity to really purify those memories, as you said.
And then you said something else when you were talking about fear, limited the sense of self. Just think about how, we haven't even gotten into the other parts of the brain, but if you realize that there's more parts of the brain that is blackened out through trauma, where is sense of self?
No psychic energy. Now, the way we say it is that the person is utilizing all of their psychic energy to defend against this trauma, to defend against what you're talking about, which this enables them to be creative, which this enables them to really take time to go beyond survival stage to a place of thriving, a place of unpacking, a place of reflexivity. And so people wonder, well, are people that are poor, are oppressed, are they innately intellectually inferior? No. They just don't have the psychic space, the neurological space to do the reflexivity that they could do.
There is no only way you can open up this space. It's literally if you stop the bad. You cannot stop the chemicals. You have to stop the bad production of the chemicals. There's a huge, your brain, remember people, your brain is going to work for you or it's going to work against you. It depends on your choice and what you want your life to be. And the reason why I call it a choice, Because if you don't know you're healthy, that's somewhere you need to go checked out. If you believe you're healthy, go get checked out so someone can verify. That's really, so it is your choice, and therapy is out here. I understand you've been busy all day. It is so hard to get in touch with this brother, but I'm telling you, he's been, all you therapists and even the work I do with people, we're busy, but we're never too busy to talk to someone. And don't get it twisted. There are people out there waiting for you to call them to say, I need help. Now, getting help, once you just think of what your brain does when you ask for help. It will start to decrease this clutter where you can start feeling yourself. Now, getting into deep therapy, you're going to get scared because it's going to bring up things that you thought you had dealt with, and I think that's a sad word anyway. Oh, I dealt with that. Oh, I'm over that. I think those are. I really think those are negative words.
They're negative words, and they are hierarchical, as though there's this pinnacle of consciousness. I like to say that, and I'm replacing those words in my own personal life and in my work with patients, is you are constantly unfolding.
Yes.
You are constantly unfolding. And as you talked about last week, not evolving, but cultivating. Mm-hmm. So it's a constant cultivation. It's a constant unfolding. And there are parts of my life, I was telling a friend, I've been in therapy for many years. And there was something that we explored a couple of months ago that was from 10 years ago, and it made sense to what I was going through in the present. Now, how did I miss it? It wasn't time. I wasn't ready. There are many contributors of why that happened, but the continuing unfolding, as I like to say, we get as close as we can to understanding each of our individual phenomena and experiences and our dimensions, and we try to make sense of it and resolve it, but it's never totally resolved. And so perfection is not what we're looking for. We're looking for individuals who are committed to a life of self-reflexivity and shift.
Yes.
That when I find something out, I am open to shifting so that I can live a healthier life.
So now going back to a healthier life, we know there's food and exercise. So Dr. Paul, what about food, exercises, and having great smelly things in the house? I really think all those things are really good. I really do. But here's the kicker. Even if you have beautiful incense of lavender flowing through your house and you are not accepting the trauma that you have to deal with, guess where your sensual perception is? It's right around here. And it's not being affected because you are still dealing with fear factor, limited sense of self, real or not real, lack of vibration. These chemicals are releasing more glucose in your body, triggering the second brain, where down here in the middle of your body, this is right above your belly button, this is where that vagus nerve goes all the way to, and you still have the parasympathetic nerve system, and then you have the auditory nerve system. All that is being affected because trauma is still triggering some fear. So your digestion of good foods, great foods, carrots, peas, oxygenated foods are not getting digested properly in the body. So all those good vitamins, and just think, remember, if you're not breathing right, so that means you don't have enough O2, and the way these hypothalamus and hippocampus triggers everything to the neurons and to the chemical level, what's also happened, it's raising your carbon level. Good carbon's only about 9% in the body, right? 19% carbon, 19% in the body. If your carbon is increasing, which is what carbon actually helps travel nutrients into the body, right? If it raises to a certain level, it kills the nutrients into the body. So it kills the hydrogen level. So hydrogen lowers, right? Oxygen lowers, carbon, the poison increases. So now it toxifies all the food that you're eating. So now what? You know what I mean? It's so there's these things going on, and we really only touched on two, but it turns into the parasympathetic nervous system, the auditory nervous system, the brainstem, and the O2 and the breathing practices. It triggers the vagus nerve. It triggers the dopamine. It triggers the adrenaline gland. The adrenaline gland produces too much of glucose, so it starts triggering all these things, and all the rest of part of your occipital lobe, your cerebellum, and all this other frontal lobe is all darkened out for healthy reason. So even if you want to fall in love, which is great, it's going to be hard to love others because your body is still trying to defend against its own body.
So you're dying inside, and you're trying to connect emotionally to someone. And you don't have the tools, the inner emotional tools and the physical tools to navigate and maintain that. Wow, that's powerful. That's powerful.
I hope, I believe we can evolve, and yes. It's so amazing once we change the atmosphere, even a plant, and give it more sunlight, water it properly, it starts to rejuvenate. Your body wants to rejuvenate. Your cells want to rejuvenate. But if they keep getting the old information from the old trauma, it just keeps getting passed on down genetically. Now, this does take us into RNA, DNA factors. Because as you hold trauma for many years, it starts generating passed on trauma to your next generation in an RNA factor.
That's powerful. Well, that's interesting because I saw research a number of years ago talking about aggression being observed in infants, aggressive behavior. And that was fascinating. On some level, it speaks to what you just said. That being passed down with DNA, that imprint.
Because it's funny, we'll say, well, where'd they learn this from? Their body knows it. Their brain knows it. It doesn't mean their mind understands it, but the brain knows it.
Wow. Everything's connected.
Yeah. What is people, I think, someone's going to ask, and I've been asked this before, what are the red flares to think I would need help? I don't, no. You know what? Stop waiting for warning signals, because there's a lot of warning signals that is happening in your body that you don't know that it's a warning signal. So to ask that question to answer that question for individually, it's tough until they give you their story. And then I start laying out, oh, this is why it's hard for you to digest. This is why it's hard for your muscles to trigger to kill fat, and this is probably why you're overweight. So there is that line in there. You know, I don't want you sitting on the couch eating chips and ice cream thinking like I'm a happy person. But there is a line in there why your muscles not able to decrease the fat cells, because there's probably an increase in the chemical response or a decrease in the chemical response that's now allowing your efforts in exercise to even be accomplished in work.
Yeah.
Now I'm talking about the digestive system that isn't probably working right because it's affecting your small intestines and your large intestines and your digestive system. All because we have not faced our things we thought we overcame. and I just don't like it. I just don't like, I'll get over it, or you'll be okay, and, just suck it up and drive on. No, you really do have to face that with therapy. And can someone do it alone? I don't think so. I'm going to be blatantly strong on that. And I don't think you could do it by yourself. Not in this climate. If you moved away to a desert place where there's no other environmental factors, then maybe. you have a shot.
Yeah. Yeah, we need people. We need.
Yeah.
This is, I believe, in interdependence. We are interdependent beings, and I think we need people to help us see parts of ourselves that are not in our consciousness for whatever reasons. And even if that's not the reason, the support, the power of other people agreeing with you and standing in intentionality with you around an issue that you are facing is. You can't buy it. It's very powerful. And you need someone who is not totally objective, because none of us are totally objective, but someone who has a level of objectivity or capacity to hold tensions in a way that doesn't, they don't get sucked into your particular subjectivity. In other words, they're there for you and they're not there for themselves, or they're not moved by whatever you're sharing.
You know, I hope this helps with positive understanding of the things that maybe you didn't think about that was important for you to know. And Dr. O'Shanes knows this, for you people out there. The reason why I believe it's good for you to know, because I don't know how you're going to say what you think you are if you don't have all the information. How do you believe that you don't think trauma has affected you when I know it has an effect on you? You're saying, is it negative? Is it positive? I know chemically it has effect on you. I know organic it has effect on you. Now, whether you choose to notice it, that is not for my eyes. It's definitely not for anyone else to call. It's only for a person to look at themselves and saying, this has caused some effect on me. Like, maybe these could be reasons why I'm A, B, C. Or why it keeps happening. That's why when you hear other people saying, it just takes positive transformation of positive thoughts. There's no way you can have a positive thought if you don't have sense of self.
Right.
You can't fake a positive thought over what the brain knows what it knows. You know what I mean? You can't walk down a neighborhood when the environment is so drug-filled, burned out, and think happy thoughts, not knowing that your brain is firing and wiring for survival. Right? It's like, you may be thinking happy thoughts, but I bet you your blood pressure is already increased, your pupils are dilated, your ears are very sensitive, and you're walking with your head on a swivel going, happy thoughts, happy thoughts. Thinking, I may not get home, so I understand that many of us live in different types and forms of environment, and we have to understand how to live in that environment. But so many of us are trying to survive even with our own bodies. Can you turn on a parasympathetical nerve system to activate your survival skill set? Yes, because in the military we do. We turn on this with the frontal lobe highlighting reasoning and deductive and information. So this is firing our senses, it's pinging it all. But when you train properly and activate your frontal lobe, you're able to have deductive reasoning. But it takes work. It takes work. And it takes a lot of work. Does some first responders can have it? It depends on the person. But they technically don't teach these in police schools. And that's why a lot of people get shot, is because this is firing at a high rate, and then their motor skills is done by what you call repetitive motor skills learning, and that's why they shoot for center mass, because none of this is deductive reasoning is on. So there is that part that changes all that stuff. And I think in the martial sciences, a lot of my martial arts brothers, we teach this type of technique. Some do. There's some clowns out there. But we teach these techniques of how to keep this open, livable, organically, and still be able to perform good feats.
Very good. Very good.
Dr. Shea, tell the people how this is going to help them heal when they come talk to their therapist or come see a person like you if they knew this information?
This is going to help you perhaps even, first of all, choose someone who can help you navigate your particular concerns and issues. If you know that your fears are impacting your capacity to reason, you want to find a therapist who can help you unearth, deconstruct, and unpack those cognitions, and to help you to develop not just the skills for reasoning, as Dr. Said to us, but a sense of self.
Right.
All of those things that make us split off, make us feel unworthy. We have to more deeply unpack those things and to then build up one sense of self that then allows us to have the capacity to reason, allows us to have the mental space, the emotional space, to be creative, to know ourselves on deeper levels. Yes.
I think, when you said sense of self, one of the things that keeps popping out in my head is I think this is why a lot of African American people don't know themselves. I think that's part of it. I think even if they read a good book or read a good, someone says, "Man, brother, you gotta read this book. This will really open your eyes up." I think it's going to be tough for them to understand that's who they are when they're fighting so many other chemical within the body responses. Because even if I give you a good book to be like, "Man, this is amazing," and you feel like you're not bringing home enough money to feed your family, that book isn't going to help you. You know what I mean? Because you're so worried, you're very, and it's okay to be vigilant to try to earn a living so you can take care of your family and do the things you like to do. I get it. So, that's why we have Dr. O'Shea to talk to people and say, "Hey, how can I balance this out?" You know what I mean? So I was thinking of that when you were talking.
Well, I think also when you talk like that, that also reminds me of the importance, and we do train clinicians these days to understand the integration of social justice in therapy. That therapy for certain populations is not just this traditional talk back and forth all the time. It is helping empower them. It's helping them make appointments or get appointments. It's helping them advocate for themselves and learning how to advocate for themselves around these physiological, somatic issues and other economic concerns that they have from sort of a Maslow perspective, these hierarchy of needs, helping that to be more integrated. And so from a social justice perspective, social justice therapists are very concerned with these identity categories and hierarchies, social hierarchies, and how they get internalized into our patients, and how we can use therapy as a way to enact their capacity to want more, but also to demand more, and to advocate in new ways for themselves, so that there is a holistic healing and not just talking about trauma.
Yes, because if you just and I like the way you put that, Dr. O'Shea. You got to remember. So this is our conversation. Remember, we're going to do this slow, and we're going to do Free at Last slow. We do it every Monday. We're going to be talking about the process and the process. So to understand the processes will help you navigate, and that's what Dr. O'Shea did. This is to help you navigate. Does this fix it all? Oh, hell no, right? This is going to help you navigate. And maybe you have some questions about yourself when you go to that therapist or if you have a therapist and say, "Hey, I just learned something." And they'll say, "That's a great point," and they'll help you talk upon it. So, man, I know our nation is very unhealthy right now. Yeah. And a lot of this is an emotional dissidence we have from ourselves. And the only way we're going to heal is if we heal ourselves. So the only way we're going to heal is we heal ourselves, we can heal our community. Otherwise, we're just going to point fingers at each other.
Yeah. Destroy each other. Good.
I hope, I am positive in thinking that the more information you have, the better the choices you can develop. And learn how to ask for help. We do this all the time. Just ask for help. So, when we talk about fear, we're talking about the work it has on us. We're talking about the limited of sense of self, real or not real. And that's important you said that. When people think that this is happening to them, it's real to them.
It's real.
It doesn't matter what someone else might say, like, oh, you're making this up, or you're thinking. It is real to them. It is real to the chemicals of the brain, right?
That's right.
The brain does not say, the brain does not look at something and say, oh, that's false. I'm not going to allow that to come into my brain and allow it. If you think it, it's going to chemical it. That's it. It's going to catalog it. Doesn't matter if it's good or bad. It's just going to catalog it. So, yeah. This is important too, I think. When you talk about compression and pressure and how things affect the neurotransmitters and the synapses, meaning how the signals fire, and the thing that fires the most or the quickest is the thing that is most compressed to trigger it. So like I was explaining this, if we're watching a great play in a theater, we're laughing, giggling, and a bomb blows off, you're not going to remember the parts of the play because that type of pressure on the brain is not as hard pressed as that bomb going off. So a play will trigger the trauma of the bomb and get you jittery more than it'll get you happiness that you enjoyed the play. So that's where the compression comes in. It's about what's being compressed in a harder rate as a quicker rate, and now it snaps the synapses. So you can have two beautiful things going on, one tragic thing, it overshadows and it compresses that trauma. So yeah.
That makes sense in terms of how people catastrophize in their lives, and how they can have so many opportunities or possibilities, but they can't galvanize it. They can't hold on to it, and they can only imagine the worst. They can only see the worst in themselves and other people when there are other positive possibilities and opportunities right in front of them. They just can't see it. That makes sense.
So we're going to be talking more. We'll give you guys enough time to ask questions, put it in the like box, share it, and we'll keep going over this again because I'm going to touch on the parasympathetic nerve system next week because and then how it goes and filters into our body. And remember, people, guess what? We're only talking about fear. It changes when you give me another word. It changes. It completely changes the chemical response of the signals. There's a lot of stuff going on in your body, and you change this over to disappointment. Like maybe like I'm thinking of my father, me growing with my single mom and not having a dad. Feeling that disappointment. That triggers a whole other parts of the brain, triggers some similar to the parts of the brain, still triggers some part of the chemicals. It does certain similars, and then you start attaching this thought and the other thought, and one triggers the heart, and one triggers the liver, one triggers the kidneys, and you got all this sadness going on, and our body's riddled with it. Yeah, people. Yeah. Yeah. I'm also giving a lecture on this more in depth on the 30th at 2 o'clock. So, but that's a paid one, and it's going to be a little bit more depth for people to jump on that. But if you're interested in that, just direct inbox me, and then I'll get you the information. Anything you want to say before we take off, my brother?
Nope, this was good. Good start.
Yeah, good. I enjoy it. We love it. Thank you, everyone. God bless. Be safe. Pay attention to yourself, and be mindfulness. I know it's a word being tossed out there a lot. Be mindfulness, but I want you to just notice what you are. Basically, if you can notice what you are, good or bad, don't judge yourself. Just notice what you are.
Ashe. Sure.
Good night, brother.
Good night.